Good morning, and thanks for joining us for Opening Markets. I'm Michelle Rook. Nick Cholis is joining us this morning from Farmers Keeper, and we're seeing kind of a mixed start to the day here with the October live cattle up a nickel. We have October feeders up 20, but October hog futures are down 10. We've got corn right now down a quarter on the December. Soybeans are down 3 cents on the November. Meal is off 470, while soybean oil's up 49 higher. Chicago wheat up 10 and a quarter. Kansas City's up 8 3/4, and Minneapolis up about 3 3/4. And Nick Cholis is joining us this morning. And Nick, I thought maybe the Fed meeting today was going to get all the headlines, but really it's been more about Ukraine and what's going on there with Russia. And so what do you think here? Do we need to put some more premium back into these grain markets?
Hi, Michelle, and thanks for having me on. It's good to be with you. Well, talking to some of our producers that are growing wheat and looking at hedging out into 2023, a lot of them are seeing these levels above their insurance premiums and saying maybe it's time to lock some in there. I think we went through a period over the past couple months where the market seemed to just be ignoring developments in Ukraine, whether it was shipments being opened back up out of the Black Sea or things not going the way for the Ukrainians. So it's interesting to see that pop yesterday, and obviously that pulled corn and beans with it. Is that enough for us to break above $7 in December corn? I think we might have a little bit of time left yet to see there.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what happens now from here, because actually there's been, hostilities escalating there with Putin and whatnot. And we've already known that Ukrainian farmers probably weren't going to get as much wheat planted. And so that's
Sure.
really in question here, isn't it?
Yeah, I think some of the latest reports I've seen are that farmers are expecting to plant about 17% less wheat than last year. It depends on how we look at those things. I think we're going to enter into a demand market here and really see what's going on. We'll find out tomorrow more certainly on corn and beans.
Yeah, what are you hearing as well from your wheat customers about how much wheat they're actually going to get planted and how much they're going to try to get planted with the base insurance prices that were set here this last week?
Sure. Well, I mean, seeing corn and bean prices coming back up again, it's starting to get back into that conversation, especially as wheat took a big hit from $13 or so
Right.
in the past several months. So we're getting back into that conversation in some of those mid-South states where they've got a larger variety of what different crops they're going to grow, certainly up in the northern plains as well. But we're starting to see at these elevated levels, it's kind of like take your pick. We also need to see what's going to happen with input prices as well as we get closer. But every day closer that we get to planting, farmers are going to understand better what their cost of production is going to be, certainly from a cash rent perspective, but also from an input perspective, and they'll be able to make those decisions.
Yeah. So corn, you mentioned, can we get above $7? Well, maybe we can with some of the news that we have here out of Ukraine and Russia. But when we get up to that $7 mark, do we start to see hedge pressure, or are farmers as concerned about it this year, making some of those sales because strong cash basis levels are providing a good market there locally?
Sure. I mean, we're heading into now what looks like potentially the third harvest in a row where we may see prices start to take off again. Certainly that's happening. I was on the phone with some producers this morning in Iowa who are starting to roll on beans. Everybody's starting to get going there. I think really what it comes down to is the individual basically looking at what's going on with their working capital and then also with their cash flow. Some of those farmers that are better established and have better established financial positions that are a little bullish on the market, every day that they're waiting so far on setting basis for whatever they do want to get off at harvest, if there is any really, they're seeing improved levels. So I think what we're seeing on the cash side of things is the elevators are trying to signal to the market and stimulate some more sales there.
So cash basis levels right now for corn and soybeans, where are they at, and historically, how do they compare to past years at this point in time?
Sure. So historically, we're seeing some of the highest relative basis levels at this time of the year. We do a lot of analytics looking at national basis levels across different markets. And we're not only looking at the relative terms, because if you're a producer in, let's say, Nebraska, and you're used to a typical year of being, let's say, 20 under on corn for December delivery, that's going to be relative to what someone else in Mississippi is seeing when they're $1 over. And so we're looking at what levels are compared to where they're at. And when we look over that, over the past 5 and 10-year levels of data that we're looking at, really over the past 17 years of data, we're seeing relatively on many markets across the country, the highest basis levels that they've seen at this time of the year. And that's all really bullish to the farmer. And they tend to see that and say, well, you know what, maybe I'm going to keep holding off then.
Yeah. So what is the suggestion at this point? Last year, we had a lot of farmers that sold off the combine because we had that strong basis and they maybe didn't store. Are producers going to store more this year, do you think?
We certainly are seeing that. So Farmers Keeper is a service that helps farmers sell their grain through us to maintain margin flexibility and basis flexibility on where they're going to deliver to help with those financial costs. And we track all the active transactions that we have on physical cash grain bushels. And we look at that historically versus what we've seen in previous years at this time of the year. And actually, we're seeing, in terms of basis being set on a national level with farmers from North Dakota all the way down to Mississippi and certainly all over the I-states, we're seeing they're about 20% behind what they typically are around this date, September 21st, for this time of the year. So it seems like farmers are holding back more and more on setting basis. That doesn't necessarily mean they won't be delivering those bushels at harvest, although I certainly think that's going to be a factor. That remains as yet to be seen. But we are seeing farmers that even will deliver at harvest waiting on that more and more because they just see, especially in corn, their cash basis levels going up every single day almost.
Okay, so that 20% behind is for both corn and soybeans then?
That's correct. That's blended between the two of them. If you look at corn itself, it's something like 27, 28% as of yesterday, and beans are a little bit below 20%.
So with your experience and what you can see in terms of these basis levels and whatnot, is the cash basis being strong totally a function of local shortages, or what really drives it?
Well, as they say, a big crop gets bigger and a small crop gets smaller. That's certainly not always the case, but this could be an area where we're seeing the elevators not wanting to take any risks about procuring grain. And certainly there's a lot of competition out there to the farmer. I always like to use this little smell test to see, how often are farmers being called by the elevators trying to get their grain more than usual or not. Right now, there's a lot of guys' phones are ringing, and that's an indication that elevators, for whatever reason, are trying to get things in, and that's a pretty bullish factor.
Okay, so what I'm trying to discern is it because of supply shortages in any one area, or is it more of a demand push in some of those areas, especially say around processing facilities like ethanol or soy?
I think it's too early to say on the demand side of things. We'll find out a lot more of that tomorrow. It's been, I think, even over 4 weeks since we've seen our last real export report. And certainly the Chinese don't come around waving a flag when they want to buy grain. And actually, a lot of their trend has been buying on the ups over the past several years, despite what people say about them trying to drive down prices. So it's from a supply perspective, it seems like the elevators are acknowledging what a lot of producers have been talking about, that there is a shortage out there.
That's right. So as you look at your maps, where are the strongest basis levels in the country?
So if you're looking at the I-states right now, we're getting to the end of this week, maybe into the end of next week as we turn into October, where a lot of those early harvest pushes are starting to go away. Certainly, if you're a producer that's got a drier setup, you're able to take advantage of that. And if you didn't have too late of a planting period, but across the South, states like Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, along the river especially, we're seeing a lot of the feed mills competing with different merchandisers down there for grain. It's not unheard of right now to see, $1.25 or $1.50 picked up bid at the farm. And that is certainly very advantageous. And then also we'll see what happens with the Dakotas. Last year, again, as we saw oil prices creep up over after the war started in Ukraine, we started to see again basis levels go to historical places that producers in those areas and anyone else never really dreamed of that they would get to in harvest, let alone any time of the year. So I'm interested to see if whatever developments happen here with Russia and Ukraine and the votes coming up with some of these regions, what is going to happen to the oil markets, and will that pull up cash and futures with corn?
All right. Well, something to watch. Thanks so much for joining us, Nick Cholis, and he is with Farmers Keepers. Thanks for joining us. And that is our